All right, welcome back to Berrien Birding. It's Matt and Josh with you, and today we're going to talk about everyone's favorite topic, gulls.
And
So
not
we've
just
got the
I was and not just gulls, immature gulls, no
immature
less.
gulls, no less, right? So we've been checking the beaches quite a bit in our neck of the woods on southern Lake Michigan, trying to find a couple of these guys, and we've been successful at a few of them and unsuccessful at a few others. So, Matt, you found this bird this morning, early November. Why don't you tell us what you found?
Yeah, so this is an immature. These days we call it Iceland Gull. A few years ago, we would have had to try to figure out is this an Iceland or a Thayer's gull, but we'll get into that in more detail. So you see this bird as it lands is a white wing. That's the first thing that drew my eyes. When it lands, those primary feathers are white. Um, Now, as it's flying along, you kind of get a sense of that Venetian blind pattern. We'll talk about this as we freeze the video in a couple of moments. So here's again the solid white wings. That if this was a herring gull, you would have a lot more kind of dark in those underwings, even in a young bird like this. This one is a little bit overexposed, not a great look. But here we can see, I mean, that tail is lighter than what a herring gull would have. And then here we see the Venetian blind pattern is what this is called, of this dark leading edge of the primaries and the pale trailing edge of the primaries. That's really kind of the hallmark of Thayer's gull. The western subspecies of Iceland Gull. The other thing, if we were 5 years ago, before Iceland and Thayer's were split, as you're trying to argue, is this a full Thayer's Gull? Is it kind of an integrate? You'd be looking at these secondaries. Thayer's Gull should have markedly darker secondaries. As to whether this bird's secondaries are truly dark enough to count this as a full-on Thayer's Gull, and we'll let the tape roll and you can kind of look for some of those characters as this bird flies, it's kind of hard to say. So I just put it in as Iceland Gull. And if people want to argue whether or not this is a Thayer subtype, they can always just look at the video and decide for themselves.
Fair enough. And yeah, this is we mentioned the other couple of birds we've seen this bird, and then we've seen a California gull, which you found as well. The other bird we haven't been able to find is Franklin's gull, but how often does this bird show up? Is this a bird that's going to show up for on the eastern United States? Would you say annually, or is this for us in the southern, southwest Michigan? How often is this bird showing up?
This is, I mean, it's hard, and part of the question is, what do you mean by this bird? In terms of Iceland gull in general, meaning the East Coast form, the form of Kuhnlien's gull, which we'll hopefully talk about later on this year if we can get better views, or Thayer's gull, which is the West Coast version, you would expect to see one or the other of them. If you're seriously birding at your favorite gull spot, be it a landfill, be it the lakefront, I would say most years I get an Iceland gull of one form or another, be it either Iceland or Thayer's here in Southwest Michigan. But certainly on this side of the state, Thayer's, the Pacific type, is more common. On the east side of the state, Kuhnlien's, the Iceland type, is more common. But the problem is that these are pretty subtle. That with this bird, it was the folded wing. And apologies, I did not manage to get any video this morning of the bird with the wing folded. This can really blend in as a herring gull with kind of a dark primaries and a dark tail. It's just not quite as dark as the herring gulls would have. The other thing you see with this bird is most herring gulls would have a much more bicolored bill, and this bird's bill is still kind of mostly dark. That's kind of one of those features that you see in kind of Iceland Thayers. And the next question is kind of how old is this bird? Is this bird 6 or 7 months old and it's getting some nice gray mantle, or is this bird about 15 months old and it's starting to get into second winter? Unfortunately, I don't kind of know enough to say. You'll certainly see some paler, browner immatures. I think this bird is probably a little over a year old based on the amount of gray it's getting in the mantle, but I'm sure there's people who could naysay that.
All right, like, comment, subscribe for more content, and we'll see you next time.